If you're applying for disability benefits or help people that are, the path to success has never been more complicated. Welcome to the Disability Expert Podcast, where we tackle the difficult issues and interview the country's top experts to help you better navigate the disability process. Winning a disability case is hard and keeps getting tougher every day. We can't promise you'll win your case by listening, but we sure think it's going to help.
This really isn't that complicated. I mean, you want to win your case, don't you? Well, then listen to what I say.
Hey, welcome to the Disability Expert Podcast. I am Chad Brown. I'm your host. I'm the owner at Chad Brown Law. And once again, we are here talking about all things disability with the country's best experts. I'm so excited today. Actually, we were preparing for this episode, and this guest is so amazing. We decided to do 2 episodes because it was completely impossible to get all the great, valuable things he had to say out in one episode. Nick Coleman. Nick, thank you so much for being on the podcast today. Glad you're here.
Yeah, excited to be on, man.
Yeah, so let me tell you a little bit about Nick and what's amazing about him and what he's going to bring to the disability space and help our watchers. A little bit about Nick. He is an Arkansas native, University of Arkansas School of Law graduate. Spent give or take about 10 years, day in, day out in the disability space, doing hearings. Excellent appellate lawyer. Has transitioned currently and is the founder, owner, chief engineer, product designer, all things AI for LexMed AI, which is the leading AI-based company in the Social Security disability space. Without question, what he's doing there is on the forefront of everything. In fact, there's so much information about AI. That's what our whole second episode is going to be about. I'm excited to be back. We've been on hiatus. I took the summer off. We launched a second podcast, Stolen. It's the world's greatest eminent domain podcast. Check that out. But today we are back with disability expert Nick Coleman. Nick, thank you so much. You got a great backstory. You got a great stories from growing up. Tell us a little bit about you. From Arkansas kid, grew up in Arkansas. Tell us a little bit about growing up. I know your dad was a trial lawyer. So what sort of led you from, being an Arkansan, is that the right phrase? An Arkansan to being a lawyer?
Yeah, so I'm just a simple Delta kid. Eastern part of Arkansas. Grew up around all of Cotton Fields Flat outside of Memphis. Son of a trial attorney and school teacher. I think law was just destined for. I remember my dad in the living room staying up at night with a dictaphone. And I didn't know what he was doing, who he was talking to, but that's how all the attorneys did it then. So that's kind of how my path started, just watching my dad in the living room, trial attorney, working out hours. And I was kind of destined on that path. And at the same time, my dad's always been kind of a tech savvy person. He kind of ingrained that with me, and I've always been interested in computers. And so that's kind of how I've turned into this legal tech gurus, because I've always been a bit of a tech nerd, and I've just been surrounded by the law since I was young. So,
hey, that's cool. I think I had a friend move to Texas once, and we drove to Memphis and spent the night. And then we drove through Arkansas, like from Memphis to I don't know, what's the capital of Arkansas? I can't, my brain. Like from Memphis to Little Rock, that's like a wasteland. Is it like, do people just disappear there on the road?
Yeah,
you just never hear from them again?
Yeah, you're going through the Delta there. And that is a horrendous road to drive to, because the main traffic from 40 and 55 intersects. And so you've got literally you're stuck between tractor trailer trucks for 2.5 hours. It's horrible.
I just kept thinking the whole time we were on that trip, if anything goes wrong, my kids are growing up without a dad. We're never getting home from here. Oh, wow. That's where you grew up, though. Sorry.
Yeah.
I don't mean to disparage it, but that's where you grew up.
I grew up in Northeast Arkansas. It's a great place to be from, but I couldn't live there any longer. So once I went up to Northwest Arkansas, in the Ozarks, you have more outdoor activities that I like to do, mountain biking, kayaking, all that stuff. I just couldn't leave. So I stayed up here after law school instead of going back to work for my dad. My dad always talked about he wanted to stay up near the University of Arkansas, so he didn't really, he was kind of supportive of it. And so I stayed up here. And we can get into it. I had some troubles trying to get actually a job up here because it was right after the recession. it was the joke. Me and my buddy, we left law school at the same time. It was like, you have a lot better opportunity to be in barista than actually getting a job at a law firm all the way around 2011. So, but I stayed up here, and it's worked out. And I really love living up here. It's really growing, and it's got a lot of that kind of outdoor activity.
It makes a lot of sense that you stayed in Arkansas to go to law school. I was in North Carolina. I had an opportunity to go to some pretty cool law schools I got into, but just financially, it made no sense not to go to UNC, which is also one of the best law schools in the country at the time. It makes sense that you decided to go to law school. Your dad's a trial lawyer. It makes sense you went to the University of Arkansas School of Law. That makes perfect sense. Like, but why'd you become a disability lawyer? Because I'm assuming that wasn't like this cards when you first started.
I had no idea even it was a profession. I went through law school focused on doing handling federal criminal defense. That's the firm that I work for, clerk for. That's what type of work that I did, clerking, and that's all I dedicated my studies towards after my first year. But when I got out of law school, I couldn't find a job, and I didn't want to go back home, and so I roughed it out, and I worked at a liquor store, 2 liquor stores, and then I ended up segueing into a substitute teaching job, which I loved. So I did that like right before I started, like April of 2013. One week I was reading Cat in the Hat to kindergartners, and the next week I was thrown into handling Social Security disability cases. And I knew nothing about it other than my mom had been approved for benefits for a rare degenerative muscular condition, and didn't know anything about how difficult it was to actually get benefits till I started handling cases. My mom had it pretty easy. I think it helped that my dad was an attorney, even though he wasn't a disability attorney. He knew how to get the documentation to kind of streamline that process. And I was just completely naive. Like I said, I didn't know that this was an occupation where you actually advocated for people in this bureaucratic nightmare. I just thought you got a social security number, whatever. And I got thrown right into the mix. High volume practice, handling 250, 300 hearings a year, and 40,000 miles on the road. And at the same time, I was expected to do the more research intensive, nerdy appellate work at the same time. And so, and talk about imposter syndrome. I was completely freaking out the whole time. And so during that time, I knew I was really good with technology. So from the start, I was trying to find ways to automate all these processes using the tools we had then to help.
So let's talk about that a minute, because not the technology component, but the grind that sort of led you there. Because I think a lot of people, when we look at AI, I was on a conversation with an attorney today who's coming on the podcast in the future, and we were talking about, she's in a high volume practice as well. I mean, she's doing 30 plus or minus hearings a month, similar to where you were. And we were talking about the way AI is, hopefully going to change her practice some moving forward. But what is it about that? We're going to get into AI. I want to talk about a bunch of stuff, but let's just stop there for a minute and say, what about being in that high level practice, a high volume practice, having to do the intense sort of legal research components of federal court? How did that sort of bridge you into starting to say, hey, I got to find a better way to do this than just, I'm with you. Like, I got a 2015 pickup truck with 320,000 miles on it. And most of those were pre-COVID. So like, I understand what it's like to be on the, 40,000 miles a year on the road. But how did that just sort of experience push you to say, hey, there's got to be a better way to do this?
Man, it just sucked. Another thing is at the time, the practice that I handled, and I think this is more common than it is now, is just they took any case off the street, man. And so, you with that type of lack of triaging cases that most firms do now, you have to be creative with your strategies, right? And you've got a lot of judges wondering why the hell you're bringing this case in front of them, and people, and for the most part, most people really can't work. But we took on some horrible cases too. Right. But the grind, man, it's just, the mental cases that you have to deal with. I mean, the backgrounds these people come from. You're not dealing with, you're dealing with the most vulnerable populations, and you're oftentimes the only person out there that's really advocating for them. They can't advocate for themselves just for basic necessities of life, and they're completely dependent on you. And I took it seriously, and I was just shocked at how horrible the whole process is. And
And I think that's interesting too, because one of the things that it never ceases to amaze me in the people that come on my show is very rarely are people in this space 10 years in who don't have a pretty deep desire, call it sympathy, call it empathy, call it just understand that humanity suffers and they want to be a part of that. One of the things though I know that we've talked about is this other reality though, that you have this population of people that are super vulnerable. And you have a huge misunderstanding in the legal community about how complex what we do is. So what are your thoughts on meeting these needs of this super vulnerable population and the reality that this is not a, I call them dabblers. This is not a profession for dabblers. Like, you need to know what you're doing.
I think there's a misconception that this is an easy practice. And I think because there's just a lot of dabblers, barely competent attorneys in this space.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, as many attorneys as there are, that's unfortunately the case at times.
Because on a slam dunk case, on cases that are just kind of no brainers, you really don't have to be that skilled. Now we've got into like, there are strategies that can be made that where a skilled attorney could really help, maybe get them more back pay or other things. But there are a lot of nuances to this. Being able to be essentially an expert in 3 domains, is intense. We have to play junior doctor, junior vocational expert, and the attorney at the same time, and then figure out how all these moving pieces work with a framework that is largely arbitrary and constantly moving. The target is constantly moving, and you're dealing with often a hostile administration with just complexity that's completely unnecessary.
You take a complex case, you put it in a complex system that's feels at times like it's intentionally incompetent. That's probably unfair, but it feels that sometimes like you have to be trying to be this bad at your job when you're in the administration. With that being said, there's good folks in the administration. One of my paralegals today was saying they talked to this person that was just so helpful and so kind, and she was just shocked. But the reality is the system feels like it's broken almost to the point it's broken intentionally. You've got people who are broken. You've got doctors who don't always want to help. And then you got some guy over here who does 3 cases every 3 years who thinks they can just drop in that space and be competent and help this person whose whole life is dependent on you winning that case. And for me, it's never ceases to amaze me that people don't appreciate just how absurd that is for you to think you can do that as a lawyer.
Yeah, man, it often feels like you're playing like 4D chess. Because, because they're just, the pieces are always moving. You're always, I think good attorneys, we talk about this, like you're looking at so many different moving pieces and the way strategies can go, how you go into a hearing, not always knowing how the idiosyncrasies of the judge that you're dealing with, how to appease the judges that you do deal with all the time. You have different strategies with different cases, with different judges that you might not try with this one, that you might do with this one. And it's the same thing with federal court too. Like the federal court work, I focused only in the eastern and western districts of Arkansas because the federal courts get into more nuance with the Social Security regulations. So one magistrate might look at the way that the SSRs apply reasonable explanations for vocational expert testimony than a magistrate in this district. So you wouldn't take that case in the Western District of Arkansas, but you'd take it in the Eastern. It's just it's not uniform, and you really have to know your stuff, man, to be a really good, effective advocate in this space.
So let me ask you, let's talk about federal court a minute. So you spent, give or take, 4 or 5 years on the grind, on the road, doing just this hard disability life. I did it for years. I certainly feel your pain. Without getting into the weeds of it, you hopped out for a minute, thought it might be greener grass. Did you hop back into the federal space? So tell me about, what was your work like in the federal space? What was your, we got an episode coming up pretty soon. I got a guy who just does federal court law coming on to talk about federal appellate work. But tell people what federal appellate work does, and what did you learn in that space that was different than what you were doing as a hearing lawyer?
Yeah, so I got burned out from driving all the time, and staying.
You had a cool car though, right?
Yeah, I had an awesome car. I built up an awesome audio system. That was the one good thing. Got to blast a bunch of Memphis rap, and I have a blast doing that. But that got kind of old. And so,
did you show up at hearings like with a? It's so funny. We were at Waffle House once, and my youngest son was with me. There was this guy in the back that was clearly selling drugs at the Waffle House, and he had this chain on and this lock, and clearly like he had been to Lowe's, and he bought like a piece of chain and he put a lock on it, and we called him Chain Guy because he was sitting in the back of the Waffle House selling drugs, and so we're there. So everywhere we go is Chain Guy. So I've got this picture of you like, you're like in some, I don't know, like some, I don't know, whatever your car was. Like it's lowered, it's got a bumpers in the back. Like
it was spinners and baking soda. Was it Arm & Hammer?
You're like Vanilla Ice in a suit rolling into your hearings with the chain guile. Is that right?
Yeah,
is that what we had?
Exactly. No, I
sorry, that's just
like if I'm gonna be on the road all the time, I was like, I might as well have an awesome stereo. And it's one I always wanted as a 16-year-old. So I was kind of trying to relive my high school days. And so that's what I did.
That's so funny.
I got old and I didn't want to stay in hotels, and I mostly stayed in the region. I'd sometimes go out of state, but mostly in Little Rock. It was like 3.5 hour drive. They would pay for a hotel, but I just wanted to sleep in my own bed. So I was getting up at 4:30 in the morning every day, and then driving down to Little Rock, and then I get home at 7. It's just a long day. And then when you have 4 or 5 cases, and then these hearings are very similar, so it's like you're asking the same questions all day, and it wears on you. I was like, I want to find a way out. And so I left the Social Security disability practice and went to a small firm to branch out and do some immigration stuff. But then ultimately, I didn't want to work for anybody else anymore. And so I said, hey, man.
There wasn't a bunch of guys lined up to hire Chain Guy, the rapper, to come be their new associate.
Yeah. So I was like, man, there's one thing that I was good at and there's a need for. We talked about this. There's more enough cases to handle for federal court, and Arkansas has one of the highest per capita Social Security, I think, recipients in the country. I have one of the highest per capita federal court dockets, and attorneys are always looking for referrals. And so I was always active in the Arkansas Trial Lawyers Association, and people were always asking for referrals. So I just started cold calling attorneys right when I knew I was about to leave the firm that I was at, and an attorney agreed to start sending me cases. And so I said, let's do it. And my dad pushed me. He's like, and he just kept hearing me bitch about how much I didn't like working where I was at. He was like, just, quit being, just start your own practice. And I was like, okay. So I did it, and man, I just ran with it. And so I built up my reputation. Initially, the attorney that was sending me cases, the 2 first cases that we took on, we lost. And he's like, I want you to take both of these to the 8th Circuit, which is crazy. Nobody does that.
As the case for federal disability cases go to die, the 8th Circuit.
Yeah, it's like, it's reckless to take one to the 8th Circuit. It's very reckless to take 2. But I was out there to like make a name for myself. And so I did it. And it was nuts. I don't know how we did it, or I did it, but that's all I worked on for like 5 months, briefing these cases for the 8th Circuit. And we lost one, but we won one. And we ended up getting one of those cases published, which is unheard of. And I ended up being still one of the, I think, 2 attorneys in the last 10 years to actually get a published remand in the 8th Circuit. And so I kind of
a huge deal for people who don't know. It's it's a major accomplishment in any circuit. To do it in the Eighth Circuit's almost unheard of.
So I got what I wanted. And so that's the reason I did that. I wanted to make a name for myself. And so within the region, if you're one of the few attorneys that have actually been successful at circuits, you've got some street cred, right? Beyond,
yeah, sure.
Just beyond the 212s in the back of my Audi. And so,
stereo chain, Eighth Circuit Remand. That's like street cred galore in the disability world.
Yeah, so that's what I ran with, man. And honestly, it was a pretty good life. I had been I take the cases that I wanted, a very flexible lifestyle, because you just on your own clock. Courts are very flexible on extensions. I'd try not to get them, but sometimes you got to get them, and they're very flexible with it. And man, I did that from 2019 through beginning of this year when I quit taking on cases, and it gets old. And I'm always looking for something else to do. And I wanted to get, this is a passion project, the AI thing, but the federal court practice was interesting. Man, all you do is research. I tried to learn everything I could about every judge that I dealt with, every magistrate. I know exactly how they're going to rule on very nuanced issues. I knew when I've got a referral where the domicile of the claimant was. I knew whether the issue in that case, whether that was something I would pursue in the Eastern or Western District on the likelihood of that panel that you would get. And that's not a panel, but within that corp of judges.
Yeah, sure.
How they would decide those cases, and created this giant nerdy repository on Westlaw that gave me the cheat sheet to navigate the Eastern and Western districts of Arkansas.
Yeah.
So it got to the point where I'm winning, 85% of my cases.
Yeah.
And
another huge accomplishment. I mean, that kind of win rate in any district is good, and in Arkansas is unheard of. I mean, you think just being forced to push to collect the data, your computer background, lady, because we're gonna spend a whole episode talking about LexMed AI and what you're doing now. But I mean, now you don't practice law at all. What was sort of your biggest takeaway from the practice of law that said, hey, the AI space is going to transform the practice of law, and that's why I'm there? And then we'll spend the whole episode talking about it.
Yeah, man. The biggest thing is I knew how effective my leveraging of technology was at streamlining my workflows before AI came out. And I knew that once AI came out, I could completely automate the things that I wanted to do previously that I wasn't able to. And also I kept my finger on the pulse of what the actual Social Security Administration is doing with AI. And my thinking is if they're building these, I've done FOIA requests, I've done deep dive researches of every program they've got. And I'm thinking, how are we going to be able to effectively advocate against an adversary? No, this is non-adversary. Yeah. It really is an adversarial process.
Yeah, sure.
How are we supposed to effectively advocate if we don't have the best tools?
Yeah.
And how are advocates in this area going to effectively advocate if they're not leveraging technology properly? And I just
you got a super complex practice area. Underestimate the level of complexity. Now we're facing a non-adversary adversary who not only already doesn't play by the rules, sometimes it feels like, but has the advanced technology. I'm going to tell you the answer, Nick. It's LexMed AI. And that's all the time we got. But we're going to talk all about it. We are going to talk about the technology. We're going to talk about how it's going to change the practice area and what it means for people who are in the process. That's all the time we got today. Nick, we'll continue this conversation. Thank you so much for tuning in. Subscribe and tune in next time as we talk about all things AI with Nick Coleman. Thanks.